another common situation in which we need to use a for loop or a loop in general is to loop or iterate a certain number of times. Okay, so in that case, the only way we can use the for loop is to loop over a sequence or an iterable in Python. What happens if we need to loop or iterate a certain number of times? So in that case, we can use a range. So we can use for in range, and then we specify the range, the number of times that we want to iterate. Okay, so let's say, for example, we want to iterate, let's say we want to calculate the summation of the first 10 or first 100 values in the numbers, the first 100 numbers. Okay, so we want to iterate 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So we can use a range. Now we're starting with 1, so I'm going to start by 1 here, and I want the 100 to be included. Okay, so if I say 1 like this, it's going to stop at 99. If I want the 1 to be included, then I have to say 101. Okay, now I don't have to put the step because I want to step by 1, which is the default. So either I put it or I remove it, it's going to be the same. Okay, now I want to accumulate a summation. So when we want to accumulate something, we need to initialize a variable that would hold the accumulation, right? So let's say we want to create a sum. Now we need to initialize it to a value that is neutral to the operation. So for the summation, if I initialize it to 1, that's not correct because 1 is not neutral to the addition, but I can say 0 is not going to affect the accumulation of the summation. If I want to calculate the multiplication, then I would need, the product, then I would need to initialize it to 1 because 1 is is neutral to the multiplication. Okay, so now here we don't have to worry about the initialization, the update, or the condition. All this is taken care of by the for loop. I just have to worry about the actual calculation I want, which is the accumulation of the sum. So we need sum plus equal n. All right, and now let's print sum. And I'm just gonna print a separator like this so that we can see, it would be easy for us to see where to look. All right, so I'm just gonna print that. All right, so here's the summation as we expect. Okay, now sometimes we want to use a loop to build a list. It's not the calculation like this. So let's say our students list, the list of our students here. So I'm just gonna comment out what is remaining because to avoid distraction here. So I have students. Now let's say I want to build another list of students that are the selected ones. Okay, selected students. All right, so I need to prepare a list to accumulate the selection. Okay, so I need to build a list out of another list, or out of another iterable, or out of another sequence or collection. Okay, so I need to prepare the list that I'm gonna build. Okay, initially it is empty. All right, and then we need to build this list out of that list of the students. So let's say S in students. So I'm iterating over the elements in the students. Now, what do I want to do? So I just want the students that have I in their name. Okay, so I can put a condition if I in S. In that case, I want to append. So I want to add it to the list. S. Okay. All right, and then I want to print the selected students. All right, so I can print that. Now you can see the ones that were selected are the ones that were accumulated into the list. All right. Now, because this is a very common case, there is an easy or a shorthand way to create it. Instead of creating that long for loop, we can use what we call the list comprehension. Okay, so for the list comprehension, so let's say I'm just gonna call it selected. All right. First of all, the end result is a list, right? So I can indicate that with a brackets. Now, inside these brackets, I can say I want all students. So I'm gonna call it STU, all right? For student, STU in students. Okay, so let's leave it there and see how the result's gonna look like if we print it like this. Print selected. All right. So that we should expect to have every single student in the list. So what happened here? Why do I repeat the variable STU here twice? So I'm saying here, every element in the new list would be the variable or the equation or the expression, the result of this expression or the result of this equation. Okay? Now, what is the value there? What is the value inside this STU? It's every value that happens in the loop. Okay, so we know this if this was on its own, we know that STU will point to one student at a time, right? So it might be easier if I use the same variables here. So if I use the variable s, okay, so s, we know this part. Variable s in the first iteration will be equal to Alice. Variable s in the second iteration will be equal to Bob. Variable s in the third iteration will be Chris, and so on, right? Now, what I'm saying here, I'm saying take the value of s or build this list based on the value of s in every iteration in the loop. So execute the loop. Take one iteration, take the value of s, add it to the list, and then go to the next iteration, take the next value of the list, and add it to the new list, and then keep accumulating the new list like this. All right. Now, what if I put a condition? I don't want every s. Or every student. I want only the students that have I in their name. So I can say if I in S. Okay. So when you iterate over students, you set the value of S in every iteration. Now check whether this condition is true or not. If the condition is true, then add it to the list. If this condition is not true, then ignore it. Okay. Now if we run this, we should be able to see that only the students that have I in their name. Okay, now this doesn't have to be just a variable. That could be an expression that represents an equation. Okay, so I want every element in this selected list to be the length of the name of the student as long as their name is I. So, okay, let me have another comprehension here. Let's say we start with the student list, the student name length, name length. Okay, So that's gonna be a list. Every element in the list would be the length of the student name. So I'm gonna say name here so that you would distinguish it. All right, so now you see how the highlighted name, it doesn't know what is that, it's not defined. Okay, now this name is not just one value for me. I want to be a list of different values for name, right? So the different values for name come from this loop. So when I say for name and students, all right. So now for every name in students, we are calculating the length and we're adding the length, the result of this expression, to the new list. Okay, so if I print name length instead of selected, I should be able to see the length of the names. Now, what if I want to add a condition? All right, so the condition would come after the loop part, just like we did here. So I'm gonna use the same condition. And this can be any condition. You can combine it with and, with or, any condition you can put here. All right. Now, when we run it, we should only see the lengths of those here. Oh yeah, so this is not used here, so I should use the variable name now. All right. Okay. So you see, this is the length of the first one, length of the second, length of the... Okay, so that could be any equation here or any translation of an equation. It is kind of resembles how the mathematical equations are expressed. It is very useful in data science applications. Now you can see this might look easier for you because this is more familiar, but once you get used to this, it becomes more convenient because it's a shorter, more condensed way to do the same thing. Now, even if you're not planning to write it, you have to be able to understand it because it's commonly used. Okay, so you'll come across it a lot. So try, it just takes a little practice and it will get easier. All right, so I guess that's all what we talked about in the class. Let me double check. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we have talked about in the class. Thank you.